Hi, I'm Dr. Veronica Kelly, the Behavioral Health Director for San Bernardino County, and we are very excited to have with us today the Chief Executive Officer for San Bernardino County, Mr. Gary McBride.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here, Gary. September is National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, and so this is a month that allows us to tell stories and share resources to shine a light on very important topics, suicide prevention. By starting the conversation and providing support to those who need it, we can prevent suicide and save lives. The problem is, many of us don't like to talk about suicide, and we certainly don't want to talk about suicide. And there's this urban myth that if you talk about suicide, people will do it. That's false. Suicide impacts entire communities. There are no people who are immune from its effects. And for every one person who completes a suicide, 135 people who knew, who liked, and who loved that person feel devastating impacts, such as anxiety, depression, despair, confusion, and complicated grief. Gary, I know that you lost a dear friend to suicide. Could you share with us your story and how suicide has impacted your life?
Yeah. And to your earlier point, just to start off, it's been very difficult. It's been probably 3 years now since that happened, and I've really only spoken about it a couple of times. It's a hard conversation to have. So, very good friend of mine. We became friends in, I think, freshman in high school. Stayed friends through the rest of our lives, and he was best man in my wedding. I was best man in his wedding, and it's a long course that led to that. He started having some mental health problems, probably late 20s, maybe mid to late 20s, progressively worse over the years, and probably, I don't know, maybe around 30, he had a first incident where he was concerned that he might kill himself. And so it was a tough situation. He was married at that point. They were living in Santa Monica, not too far away, but far enough that it was difficult for me to get there. And I got a call in the middle of the night from his wife just saying, could I come out? And it was tough. She said, you're one of the few people that he trusts, and he really wants you here. And we had to take him in and admitted him to a psychiatric unit that evening at a hospital. And from there, it was probably, I think, there were a couple of more incidents like that along the way. Not for lack of care in terms of both psychiatric and medical over the years. His family was very supportive of getting him treatment that he needed, but it was just one of those things that was getting progressively worse and worse. Eventually it started to affect his ability to work, and that really had that caused a lot of additional emotional problems for him. It made it much more stressful. He had kids at that point, and he had two young children. And it just became more and more difficult for him. And he began to withdraw because he was embarrassed. A number of his friends that we grew up with, that we went to high school with, that we had all stayed friends with, it was a pretty successful group of people. And the more he was having problems, he became embarrassed about his own situation and just pulled back. And it was tough on him. And so one night, he just went incommunicado for a couple of days, and he had moved to Oklahoma at that point. His wife's family lived there, and because of the issues that were going on, and she felt she needed some support from her family with raising the kids and working, and so they moved there, which also isolated him a little bit again. And it was the right decision for the family, but it was just another stressor in his life in terms of that. And so he had a friend out there that called me one evening and just said, I haven't been able to get a hold of Paul. I said, I haven't been able to get a hold of him either. That's, that's very unlike him, because normally he was very responsive and he returned my calls right away whenever I reach out to him. And so, he went over to check, and that's when he found him. It was a intentional overdose, and so it was tough. I mean, he left behind, a wife and 2 young kids. His son just graduated from high school this year, so it was tough.
I think the point you're making too is that it's not just an incident and then it's over. For those of us who are left, it has long-reaching effects.
It does.
And death is difficult for all of us, certainly, but death by suicide is more traumatic. It's sudden, occasionally it's violent, and it's usually unexpected. And there's no place for us to direct our feelings. So if someone was run over by a car, you can blame the person who was driving the car. And if cancers who took your loved one, you can blame the cancer. But when the person who has the answers is no longer there, we have nowhere to go. And that's why it's really important that we have these conversations. Is there anything that you wish you knew then, 3 years ago, 20 years ago, that you know now?
I mean, that's part of the problem. I mean, those of us that are still here, you can't stop second guessing yourself in terms of, what else could I have done? And I don't know that there's a lot we could have done. It's tough. I think he had a lot of support, a lot of love, a lot of good professional support. But from my side, I think I was so focused on giving him the support that he needed and really talking to him about treatment options and the various things that he was looking at. I didn't think a lot about getting help and information for myself that could have maybe helped him. And so, in hindsight, I know there's a lot of resources available out there to help the families and people that are going through some of these things before it gets to the point. And I certainly wish I would have reached out and taken advantage of some of those before. I don't know that it would have changed anything, but maybe. And you just never know. And so, taking advantage of some of the resources out there, and I know even his own kids, both of his kids have been active in supporting the local chapter of NAMI in Oklahoma. And so, yeah. I think that's probably the biggest piece, is what else could we have done and how could I have better informed myself that I could give him more support.
And that's why we have this month, and that's why it's so important that we are starting this conversation, because suicide impacts all of us. And most of the time, we just don't say anything. But the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, NAMI, that you talked about, is a great resource, as well as Yellow Ribbon, which is for survivors, the folks that are left. And I wanted to point out our ribbons. Purple and teal, this is the color of suicide prevention. And so during the month of September, we hope that folks wear purple and teal and that we continue the conversation. And so I really want to thank you for starting the conversation here with us. We all need to have open and honest communication about mental health and suicide specifically, because one conversation, like what we just had here, can literally save a life. Thank you so much again for your time,
Thank
Gary.
you. I appreciate the work you do.
Thank you. And until next time, catch you on the well side.